All right, hey everyone. Welcome to the 5th edition of Static Website Meetup. Thanks so much for coming. We're really excited today because we convinced Thomas Reynolds to fly down from Oregon, where he spends most of his time being technical director at one of the most famous digital agencies in the world right now, Instrument. But he is also the creator of Middleman, a static site generator and the weapon of choice for some really big enterprise solutions. And I won't talk more about it because that's what he's here to do. There's a new version out, and he'll go through it, and we'll talk about the stack, and we'll talk about, he'll take a Q&A afterwards. And yeah, so really excited. Thank you so much for coming, and Thomas Reynolds.
All right. Hi, everybody. You hear me okay? All right, lovely. Cool. All right, so I thought I'd start out with a show of hands. Who actively has used Middleman? Lovely. All right, so most of this talk, I'm going to go kind of a little bit into the weeds on some of the new features. If you haven't used Middleman, or if I just completely talk right past you because I've been looking at this for way too long, just flag me down immediately. Don't let me go too far. I want this all to make sense. And with that, let's do it. Cool, so I'm Thomas. My Twitter handle, TDRayno. And award-winning Fjords is where I infrequently write inflammatory things, but I'm getting better about it over time. And of course, I'm the creator of Middleman. Middleman, as you know, is a static site generator. It's written in Ruby, and it's been around for a really, really, really long time. So people seem to like it, and it's been pretty great. I am the technical director at Instrument up in Portland, Oregon. We're a mid-sized independent creative agency. Actually one of the larger ones in the world at this point because we've been growing pretty well. There I spend most of my time being the technical director, doing code reviews, spending way too much time in JavaScript and not enough time in Ruby. But it's been pretty great. So over the last year and a half or two, I've kind of shepherded the rest of the company into using Middleman without imposing too much on them. And it's been really great to see people make really huge and amazing projects without my influence at all. So some of those projects you may not know are actually static sites. Google Design is a project we did for them last year. It is where they house all their material design documentation and is also a Medium-like publishing platform where they can put articles about design and videos and stuff like that. So this whole thing, just normal. It was actually using a beta of Middleman before version 4 came out, which is really nice of them to let us do that. We recently relaunched Stumptown Coffee from Portland, Oregon, if you're familiar at all. Also, again, we're able to pair something which was a e-commerce site on one side with through an API with static for most of the front end, which makes the site super fast. One of our other teams that I don't work with directly at Instrument, we also just launched a site for eBay's new mobile app over the holidays. Again, straight static site, super fast. It's on all the CDNs. It's actually in something like 40-something languages, which was a piece of cake, and I'm really proud of this site. I also got to do the front end for this site too, so it's really great. And we also just redid Sequoia Capital's site, which is really, really beautiful now. And again, super fast. This is one of the more complicated builds, and we're slowly writing some technical information about it because it's pretty cool how it pairs with other non-static platforms for a little bit extra interactivity. Cool. So what is a static site generator? I can skip this slide. It's a thing, you jam data in it, and out the other side comes HTML. And hopefully it does that fast, and it allows you to host your site anywhere you want in the world, not have to worry about security problems or caching problems. Well, there's still caching problems. Cool. So since there's 1,000 of these things now, everyone's making one. Pick your language. There's probably 4 or 5 static sites generators being built in it now. So what makes Middleman different? For one, we're really old. I wrote the first commit to Middleman 7 years ago. And I was basically spending my days before Instrument coding a lot of email templates, and that is not very fun, so I automated it. And basically built some horrible pipeline that started with image ready, if anyone remembers that, scripting image ready, running it through a Ruby pipeline, ending up with emails coming out the other side. And as I went through my career, I basically just carted this pile of Ruby scripts around behind me and eventually gave it a name and put it on Ruby gems. And that was 7 years ago, which I'm very proud of because open source fatigue is real, and trying to stick with it for all that time has been really fun. And it's also been super rewarding to now see like so many people using it that I would never even expect. And a lot of people, sites and stuff I actually use are built using Middleman, so that's really, really great. Another thing about Middleman is version 3, which was the current stable version before version 4, obviously, was out and stable for 3 years. That's huge. Like it's a simple tool, and I like to work with simple tools. So, like I said, data in, HTML out. There's no real reason to keep reinventing the wheel every single year. There's a lot of hype, and I'll go into some reasons why I actually did reinvent a couple wheels for version 4. But for the most part, I'm proud of the fact that you're able to build your company on this, you're able to build your agency on this, and it's just going to keep working, hopefully. It's not going to be the hype train every single year. That said, I may switch over to like a React versioning thing and just jump to version 22 or 23. Depending on where Jekyll ends up, I'll just go a version higher, like do the PlayStation approach. And yeah, so over the course of this process, there's been 1,174 closed issues. And that's a badge of pride, not a badge of shame. Software has a lot of bugs. All software. Cool. Another pretty differentiating fact about Middleman, or at least the way I approach using Middleman, is that it's code first. A lot of systems, they take configuration in the form of JSON or YAML or something like that. Or they take configuration in the form of convention. So if you put your files in the right place, they come out in a place that you would expect. Or if you are able to make the world's largest JSON file, you can kind of organize things into a system that makes sense to you. I don't agree with this. I actually think that it doesn't matter how proficient you are with programming. You should be able to write a couple for loops, and you're going to get way more power out of those for loops than trying to. I don't know if anyone's ever has been using Webpack recently, but Webpack config is this crazy set of special characters inside of strings to make pipelines, and it's pretty fun. I don't believe in that. So Middleman is code first. That means when we want to make new features, we don't just expose extensions and new features. We also expose the APIs that we build to use those features to everyone. Cool, so Middleman version 4. So after 3 years of stability, I got tired looking at the Ruby code base that I had been looking at for the 4 years previous. So I started taking some of the things I had learned as a developer in that time and trying to clean up the code base and making it a little easier for other people to work in it. So basically just started picking features off, pick low-hanging fruit, bad code smell, got Rubocop in there to basically standardize all the Ruby into a single style guide. And then just started cleaning things up. We went ahead and removed any functionality with the help of a couple of co-contributors that was duplicated. So there used to be this way you could create a proxy, which is our way of generating a file from a template. There used to be 2 ways to do that. We removed one. Now just the proxy method remains. So we did that in a bunch of places to rip stuff out that was duplicated and slightly different. We also took out a bunch of features that you've never heard of, such as ASCII Doctor. ASCII Doctor is gone, I'm sorry. It is now in its own extension. And then I just started using it at work. So we started using it on projects and iterating until finally it got stable again. Pretty much all the code was touched, but we kept the original test suite for the stable version. So test suites aren't magic. There are new bugs and regressions definitely introduced, but for the most part, it should work pretty much the same as it always has, with some new features and stability on top. All right, so I'm going to run through a litany of new features. Cool. So we added the concept of environments, basically stolen straight from Rails. This is, formerly you could develop on a site or you could build a site, and that was basically it. That's not how we actually work. So we added environments, so you can have staging, you can have QA, you can have production, and you can fine-tune your config for your site in each one of these environments. Then when you want to build for one of these targets, you just pass the environmental flag there with the -E, and it'll load up that specific config. So this, config can get really gnarly with all these if statements and environmental variables, and this tries to make that way, way simpler. So our continuous integration server uses this. Our automated tests use this, and it makes it really nice to have a whole bunch of like intermediate things. You can also use this for content. So if you want to have like your environment could be version 1 and version 2, you could build them separately, and maybe they have different data sources on the way in, or maybe you change some URLs as you migrate from versions to other versions. We went ahead and we moved our new project templates to GitHub. They used to be in Ruby gems, which meant you had to do a lot of work in Ruby to install them and then get them in your path and then find out where they are. So now they're just Git repos. They just get cloned down. This is basically how NPM and Bundler work anyway. So everyone's pretty much okay with their libraries just shelling out to the Git command. So now, if you've got a template for a reusable project that you want to make, just throw it up on GitHub, make it a public project. You can just pass the GitHub shorthand account name, repo name, and it'll pull it down for you. They're also, they're not just static files anymore, so they can be evaluated as Thor tasks, which is kind of like a rake task. It has a little bit extra object-oriented stuff to it. Middleman uses it for its whole command line for historical reasons, so that's why we're using it here. And basically it allows you to script new projects. So the current default new Middleman project now will ask you things like, hey, are you using Sass? Do you want to use Compass? Do you want to use live reload? And it'll build a config for you based on those preferences rather than just doing a one-size-fits-all. So that is available now to anyone who wants to customize their own templates. We were running into a problem where people would write a loop inside of their config based on some external piece of data. So they would say, I have a data file, it's got a list of people in it, and for each person I want to make a new person name.html. And then they go back and they'd edit the data file, and then they wouldn't get a new person HTML out the other side. And that was really confusing to people, but the way it actually worked was you have a config file, we parse it when you start the thing, and then we just throw our hands up. And if you change the conditions of what information went into that config file, you have to restart the server to make it actually see those changes. So in version 4, we re-architected a bunch of stuff in the core into this thing called collections. And basically what it means is there are now external sources such as the files you have on disk or the data you have in your data folder are now these kind of like live objects. When anytime they change, they send an event, and it looks into your config, and if it sees that you're ever using people from people.yaml and you've touched the file people, it'll rerun the inside of your for loops. So this should just basically mean you don't have to restart your server as often, but it does let you do really weird things like you can implement like categorization or paging or a lot of the blog functionality by just writing plain Ruby in your config. You say, look at the sitemap, tell me all the pages that are CSS, look in them, see which ones reference some URL, group those together, and concatenate them. You can do that now, and it'll be up to date throughout the whole process. A lot of people don't need this functionality, but if you were having to restart your server over and over again, it's pretty welcome. As of about a week ago, someone had a really good idea, which is why can't I set all these config values from the command line, because my continuous integration server would really like that. So this is in the current release now. Any config that Middleman can do can be passed as a command line argument. We've been working through a bunch of stuff that relates to localization, which Middleman is quite good at compared to some other systems. And one thing we had a problem with was basically how do you refer to the thing that generates a file in a bunch of different locales? So you have like a page, which is the about page, and you want to say like, okay, link me to the about page in Spanish, or like link me to the about page in the default language. And so what we ended up coming up with is an optional system that allows you to add a unique ID to any object in the system, and then link directly to it using the normal template link helper. So whenever you're building proxies or using the page command, you can pass an ID. That becomes a unique key, and then you can use that whenever you're building URLs. So it makes it really easy to like loop over all the locales and just generate a link for every language in every locale. Got a little ambitious with the way URLs are handled, which works 95% of the time. Basically, previously we were taking a kind of Rails approach where we have these Ruby helpers that are like link to or image tag or something that will generate a path to an asset. And then when we wanted to do a feature like add a hash to the end of every single file, as we, for caching reasons, we would hack basically into that helper and rewrite it to output different string content. In version 4, we just do away with all that and we parse the raw output. So any file, whether it's a library that you don't control or your files or HTML or CSS or JavaScript, we now parse every single thing looking for URLs that point to assets, which are like JavaScript, CSS, images mostly. Then once we have those keys, we can go through and we can use those for rewriting. So this allows things like asset hash to work on static files that you aren't actually generating. So if you have, an old page or like an old legacy part of your system that wasn't in Ruby or wasn't in ERB, now these tools can run against it. Relative assets is a really nice one. This just means that there's a single feature now where by default we don't touch your URLs. If you turn on relative assets, hopefully every single path in your entire system becomes relative to where it's at, and makes it super easy to deploy to anywhere. Our continuous integration server has these super deeply nested paths, so it lets us build these builds that are portable without people having to remember to go up 3 directories or 4 directories depending on where their files are. As part of our refactor, we had some bad programming in the old version where basically Ruby at the time was really a fan of singletons. So we had this shared context that whenever you started Middleman, it put it all in this one place and everyone could look into it. And that worked pretty well. But it wasn't multi-threaded. We couldn't run in parallel. And basically, if you happen to have a variable the same name as one of my functions, you would overwrite it. And then we had all these bug reports of why did I overwrite this setting from some other file in a loop? So we went in, we gutted that. Every single executable piece of user code now has a nice little sandbox that it lives in. As a side effect, you now have to add methods to these contexts if you're an extension developer. So if you want to add a new command that is available in config.rb, you can say expose to config. Or if you want something to show up in a template, you can use the helpers method as currently, or you can, in your extension, expose specific methods to the template. So this is actually a backwards incompatibility with a lot of the current extensions. It shouldn't necessarily touch that much user code, but there it is. Pro is now we can run all of our builds in parallel. So this is a kind of like a 30-40% speed boost. This is on by default in v4, and it's working pretty well. A lot of it is still I/O bound and just Ruby slowness in general, but this is a freebie. So Middleman has this source folder, and that's where you put all your contents. And whenever a file changes, it updates the thing. So you can go ahead and live reload, or you can refresh, and you'll get the updated contents. Kind of abstracted that a bit, and now you can say my Middleman source is a combination of any arbitrary number of folders that exist anywhere. So you could say source is a combo of my actual source folder and maybe these Bower files over here, and maybe some shared mounted Dropbox disk over here, and it'll just layer them all on top of each other and let you build one site out of all those things. So that lets you have shared libraries that you may want to have on a whole bunch of different sites. You don't want to copy them in or use GitHub submodules. You can just point them all at a shared directory on your server, and it'll work just like the normal source folder. What this gave us the power to do is a new thing called the external pipeline. In a bid to try to keep up with the JavaScript frameworks, which is where a lot of these build tools are going, we want to find a way to integrate their tooling with our tooling so you don't have to have 3 terminal windows open at all times. So the external pipeline is a new feature that basically says, hey, you control this command over here. It could be gulp, it could be ember, it could be webpack, it could be any shell script you can dream of. You tell it to go dump into an arbitrary folder somewhere, usually a temp directory, and Middleman will take all the contents that come out of that and put it back into the site. So you can have Webpack generate a JavaScript file, and then you can have Middleman, hash all the URLs in it, or you can have it minify it. Finally, as part of the general cleanup that we did, I went through and added contracts, which is a library in Ruby that adds kind of design by contract typing to Ruby. So whereas formerly it was just a complete, free-for-all, Ruby is really permissive and tries to coerce types back and forth without even asking you. Now every public middleman method, it has a type signature. And so if you're writing an extension against it, or if you are even writing code in your config RB, you pass a string where expected a function, you'll get a nice error message that tells you, hey, we expected a function. Maybe you should fix that up. So this has been really, really great. I did a talk on it in the YouTube here. I'll make sure these slides are available for everyone later. But it's been really great to find all the bugs in your code you didn't even know you had. I think within like a couple hours of turning it on, I'd already found a whole bunch of even internal method calls that were future bugs waiting to happen because of some type coercion stuff. Cool. So yeah, so Middleman 4 is out. It's 4.1.4 as of today. I don't have very many plans for the next version. I'm just going to keep using it at work, and as I come into new problems, I'm going to continue to try to solve them. So we're going to aim to get back to that 2-3 years of stability with these new features and let people keep building their stuff on it. The one outlier there is basically what to do about JavaScript. I think it's going to win, so at least on the front end for front end tooling. So we're going to continue trying to be the best we can be at generating a lot of files from data and letting like that kind of like contentful data model to like a whole bunch, like hundreds of thousands of pages flow continue to be really nice and useful. And then we're going to try to work as hard as we can to integrate with the other front end tools for managing your Ember apps. We still, as of now, do not have an official release of Sprocket support for version 4. That is the project which is the Rails asset pipeline. It's a rough library to work with, and I don't use it anymore, so I stopped working on it. It's not in there yet, but we have a new maintainer for it. It looks like MailChimp's going to be taking over maintainer, so we should have a full polished up asset pipeline support for version 4. That's probably the biggest regression if you're using just like out of the box Middleman and expecting it to work like Rails would. I don't use it that way, so it was really hard to keep the motivation up to support what is a really painful library. And then basically what we can do to make it better is everyone else can help me out a little bit. Open source is super hard, and I only have this one Mac laptop, and I don't know how things are working on Ubuntu or every single new version of Windows. So keep submitting bug reports. Version 4 has been out for about 3 months now. We've nipped most of the super obvious regressions in the bud, but if you see some, or if you try to upgrade your extension or your app to it, reach out. Super responsive. And then we have the community forums on the Middleman site. So if you know what you're doing, if you're already at the forefront of static, there's a lot of new people, and there's a lot of designers dipping their toes in who just need to help figure out the basics of what they're looking at. And I made this slide because I was getting super excited that I was about to get to 1 million downloads. But since this afternoon and now we actually went over there, I was going to beg you to all open up your laptops and get me a couple hits, but I don't need it. We're good. So, yeah. Cool. So outside of Middleman and more for like this group, it's actually really exciting to have groups like this right now, and it's really exciting to be able to do a large portion of my work as static development, which is really great. So I think we're moving towards something, and I don't entirely know what that new stack or platform is, but it looks kind of like this. So I commit to GitHub, I get website. And so like right now, we're using Netlify a lot for that. Makes that pipeline super simple. We also have some internal tools for that, but hopefully there'll be more things like this that just take out all those build steps for you. We're still trying to solve the problem that WordPress, I guess, solved, which is clients really love to have a nice interface to put their data into. So we have these YAML files, we have these JSON files. They're not super fun to look at, and our clients, or at least my clients, aren't going to go into GitHub and make pull requests for it. So we're trying to solve the problem of how do we do that. And so right now, I'm using Contentful a lot. We're also using some horrifying Squarespace scraping for some other projects to get data out of Squarespace into YAML. So it's really super pretty for the clients, and then we don't have to go there. But I think that's like completely open question still is how do we, they don't care. They just want, like I said, get in, website out. They just want to, form field in, website out. So those are the two problems I think we need to solve. And trying to see if we can come up with something that looks as good as Squarespace, but is actually like a joy to work with and really works with static. And then, I don't know, I write JavaScript all day. I'm super excited about React. I'm using React a lot. I suspect Gatsby or something like it is just going to like be like a weird like exclamation point, and it's going to flip the whole script. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if we can stay in the loop and ride the wave with them. But man, JavaScript all the way down is a really compelling argument. Cool, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Let's do some questions.
Do it. Yeah, so the question is whether incremental builds, which just regenerate the files that need to be changed on demand, are probably something that's going to be necessary in the future. I think, yeah, probably. So basically, the problem Middleman has is it is really incredibly permissive with what you can put into it to get a site out. A lot of people just use ERB, which is Rails templating engine, but we support everything. So like you can run Liquid through there. You can run any Jade, you can run JavaScript templating languages through. And there's no standard, there's kind of like the concept of source maps in JavaScript and Sass right now that lets you like get a pathway of what inputs went into making this output file. And there's nothing like that for templates. So you could, if you were willing to say, okay, I'm only going to use ERB, we could Rails has tools that allow you to know like how kind of like dependencies flow through ERB. Then you could definitely like build something that would allow that. Like right now we're just too agnostic because basically we're saying like, hey, we'll shell out to Node.js, and if it gives us a string back, we're going to make that a template. Or like you want to use Go templates, whatever, it's cool. So there's not like anything that lets us do, everything does its own dependency management differently too. So like Liquid template or dependencies and partials are completely different from ERB ones. Which are different from Haml ones. So the ecosystem is a little too broad to do that. That said, it would be probably pretty simple to just, instead of using our built-in partial method, make your own like tracking partial, and then you can actually build a lookup of what file you're in and where you end up on the way out. So I think it's definitely super useful. It's not the most common use case, but patches welcome basically is I think my answer on that one. It would definitely improve things a lot. You're still not going to be able to get out from under things like localization or string changes or layout changes that are going to basically have to cause the entire rebuild of the site. But for tiny little HTML fixes on the page, that would save you a bunch of time. Sorry. The question was basically whether something like Contentful or a hosted CMS, like what are the flaws currently in the current ecosystem with that. Contentful is completely agnostic. You just upload your data model and you put content into fields, and you can get that back out later to build your site out of. I think that approach is always going to be not the smoothest because it's just like you get like these random building blocks, but you don't have a nice like designed through line. Like you can't, something like Squarespace is super nice because it's like this is for blogging, and then the fields are things that you do in blogging, and they have a nice UX so that it works at UA you expect it. So I actually think you have this Contentful thing, which is like data stored on the internet, and then you have Middleman, which processes it. I think there's probably another layer, which is these like domain specific tools. So there's something like Contentful, but like a blog editor interface between the two. So rather than using their form fields, you use something that looks like WordPress. Or if you have really specific contents publishing, or like things where you're using a lot of images and galleries, there would be some other piece of application or software that would give you nice UI and UX over what is basically just an arbitrary data source. So for now, I'm hoping the space gets so crowded that like every single niche has a product that tries to fill it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the question was basically whether generic build tools like Gulp and Grunt and Rake will eventually, like whether they serve the same purpose as a static site generator. And I think it's kind of the same answer to the previous question. Like, they're the baseline tool, and then you need domain-specific tools on top of that. So you're always going to have, you're going to be working with Sass, and like whether you want to write that same damn gulp task every single time to do the same thing, you can do that. But eventually, someone's going to package it up, and that's just what we call a static site generator. Like, you can build that. You can build. There are plenty that are actually just built entire. I think Brunch is one that's, I think, a lot of just gulp or grunt plugins. I don't remember. And then I think Octopress is another good example. Octopress is like built on top of Jekyll, so it's another line down. So you have the build tool, and then you have the thing that just makes websites, and then you have the thing that makes blogging websites. So I think we'll just keep trying to make a nice pyramid of technologies and have more and more specific ones at the top. So the question was, how do you do testing, optimization, and A/B testing when everything is static and like compiled out already? So there's not a lot of ability to do that randomness. I just do it in JavaScript, basically. So I will be kind of hacky about it and enter HTML, some string content, depending on like which user I'm trying to get it to. You can also build, if you have the tools in place, you can use another piece of routing software like Apache or something to route people between two versions of the same page. But as it's static, there's not really a lot of control you have once it's been built out. So the statement was, version 4's internals are using a lot more immutable data structures, and that is correct. We're using the hamster library, which is some persistent data structures for Ruby. I just want to play with them, and hopefully everything comes out the same the other side. People were, in their code, they were like looking at a data object and they were changing a value and wondering why it didn't save to the original source file. And so now it yells at you, I guess. So I think that's really the only problem that the immutable structures solve. Hopefully people are not mutating their data too heavily, but yeah, it happens. So the question was, have I tried the Netlify CMS? I've looked at it. It's cool. I'm excited to play with it more. I don't have any projects that would need it now, and our stack is really spun up with Contentful for a lot of stuff. But yeah, I want to see more tools. Yeah, so the question was whether, if given a chance to restart Middleman now, and whether there'd be any changes if I was able to start from scratch. I mean, it's unlikely I would build it in Ruby, just to be honest. It's harder to install than other things, simply because more people are using JavaScript systems now. Tools like Hugo is a really good one, and they're built in Go, so they're able to distribute just a binary to everyone, and just doesn't matter whose machine it is, just drag this file in and you're up and running. So a lot of the heartache that new Middleman users have, who are designers or JavaScript people who haven't been in Ruby so long, it's just basically getting the thing installed, which is kind of a pain. So, I don't know if I would. I wouldn't wish that on myself in a million years, to have to rewrite everything. I'm definitely not going to just port to another language just for the experience. But it would probably be, I have no idea. It'd probably end up being JavaScript. Everything's JavaScript now. Or TypeScript, I guess, would be a nice middle ground for me. Yeah, so the question was basically, are clients asking for static, or are they asking for the features that static provides, and we now have a solution for them? Does that sound right?
Yeah, just like if it's easier to pitch like arguments of performance, and are they more receptible to those than before? Like arguments that concerns the infrastructure rather than just the design and ability to meet milestones.
Yeah, so for the most part, no one cares until like you sign a contract and you actually get to speak to someone technical. It's basically people who sell marketing sites don't know the difference. They're paying for you to make a site that's stable and fast and secure, and how you do that is more you to work out on the side. It's been better, Middleman's been better for us just to have a single pipeline for everyone that's able to learn the same kind of tool. We still do Gulp and Grunt and Webpack and Node and React and all these things, but if it's just going to be like knockout like what is a traditional website, then like it's really great to have a shared platform for that. All the stuff on the side is stuff that I have to care about. I don't want the server to go down. I don't want it to get hacked. I want it to be fast. I don't want to have to pay for this cloud server all the time. So I get all those benefits without even having to like think about it, because I can just deploy the CDN, go to bed. It'll never crash, and it'll never be hacked. So It's been great for me as technical director to not have to worry, but the clients don't really notice as much. Yeah, so the question is, what drives the pace of new releases for Middleman? And basically, yeah, in my conception, it's pretty much feature complete and has been since that 3.0 release. It provides the things you would get from competitors. So all the stuff that's on top of this is niche features I needed in my day job and, kind of like power features that a small subset of people use. But for the most part, going from taking templates, like probably the biggest thing that it's had forever is localization that a lot of these frameworks don't have. So the fact that it does the normal thing plus localization and gets you a nice fast site up the other end, that's kind of enough for me. That's like one tool's job. So if there are more features that can be glommed on, I tend to want them to live in another step in the pipeline or in an external feature. Like for Sequoia, we actually did build a whole bunch of custom extensions that added additional functionality outside of the core. So for me, as long as the extension API is solid and it's working for people, then I'm okay with those kind of weird things going there. So Vox has stuff where they run a lot of their CMS stuff is run through shared Google Docs that Middleman slurps in it and builds with, and so they host their own Google integration plugins for Middleman. That doesn't ever need to come in the core, but they're able to go ahead and do that kind of stuff. Same thing with Contentful. Haven't talked to the tech people on their side at all. They just have a Middleman plugin that works pretty well. So yeah, as far as who's involved with it, it is pretty much me. I have a couple other people at work who, what happens with open source is when you are working on it, you care very much. And so you submit a ton of bugs, submit a ton of patches, and then when you are not working on it, you just go off to your life, unless you're the maintainer. So people come in and out. So I have a bunch of really great maintainers, but when they're between projects, it's probably just me. And honestly, I'd say maybe 90 minutes of every day is simply bug triaging and supports and pointing people to the correct documentation. So it's a large investment of time, from a community management standpoint. So I'm trying to encourage more people and trying to have these teams that are now using it in a large capacity and empower them to make their own extensions to handle specific use cases.
All right,
thanks everyone. Awesome.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Thomas Reynolds. That was an awesome presentation.
All right.
Really
cool.
appreciate it.
Thanks everybody.
So yeah, this is our third static site generator presentation, I think, out of the 5 minutes we have. Of course, that's a very central build tool for this new approach and this new stack. We enjoyed actually the biggest public directory for static site generators is called staticgen.com, and that's built in Middleman. So there's that. We maintain that. Once again, thanks so much for coming. That was great. That was a great Q&A session. Looking forward to I guess it will be a few years before we see 5.0, right?
Hopefully.
But you guys also, in your work in the agency, bring out some really awesome sites. I think my favorite is probably Sequoia right now. For that type of site that just tells such a beautiful story and is super performant, and so that's a real joy. But yeah, looking so much forward to seeing your upcoming projects and pushing the envelope for what can be done with this new stack. So thanks for that. Thanks for coming, and thank you everyone for coming, and see you next time.